and good day, Algebra. We are doing a rare Friday lesson, but this one is just too good to wait until Monday. It is a PO18 using function notation. And let's define it. Okay, function notation is a way to identify an ordered pair in a relation that is a function. Okay, it's a way to identify an ordered pair in a relation that is a function. So if you're using function notation, it's already a given that the relation you're dealing with is a function. It kind of tells you that up front. And the value for this is, notice on this graph here, how many equations do I have graphed on this coordinate plane? Two of them, right? And so if I were to ask you, what's the value of y when x is 2? You're like, well, which one are you talking about? Are you talking about the straight line going up here? You're talking about this curved one here, right? And I say, oh, well, the blue one. Oh, well, mine's printed in black and white, so it doesn't really help me, okay? So if you'll notice here, these equations, one is written as, and depending on how small it's printed, maybe you can't quite tell, but what this says here, it says f of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 3, okay? The equation of that curved, no, it does not. As I said, it might be kind of hard to tell, okay? But you got to trust me. It says f of x equals x squared minus 2x. So you might want to write that down next to the graph like I did there, if it's really tough to see that. Okay, it says f of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. And this type of equation, we'll get to this starting in like PO45, but it's a quadratic equation that when you graph it makes this curved line called a parabola. You don't need to care about that now. All I want you to care about is that it says that f of x equals x squared minus 2x minus 3. Beckman, warning for you. Okay? Side conversations while I'm teaching just can't happen. Right? And this f of x basically replaces the y variable. So if we wrote y equals x squared minus 2x minus 3, it would mean the same thing. But using that f of x notation, it tells us it's a function. And it helps us identify which equation on this graph I'm talking about. Because this one you can see a little bit more clearly. What does the other equation say? G of x, right? This one over here says g of x equals 2x minus 3. So rather than me saying, what's the value for y when x is whatever, if I say, tell me f of 2. Good question, okay? Tell me f of 2. Essentially what I'm, here, I've got it right here, okay? When I say find f of 2 or tell me f of 2, what it means is, what is y when x equals 2? Okay? What is y when x equals 2? And because I use this f of 2, which equation am I talking about here? The f of x equation, or this parabola here. So function notation does two things for us. A, it lets you know you're dealing with a function. That's the less important of the two as far as PO18 is concerned. The more important piece is it tells you which equation you're working with and what it wants you to do. Okay? The f of 2 when f of x equals 5x minus 4 means what is y when x is 2. So what would we do here? If I ask you to find f of 2 with f of x equals 5x minus 4, what is that having you do, Kylie? Yeah. Remember that this f of x and y are kind of the same thing. We just replaced y with f of x to tell you it's a function and which equation we're using. So this equation is essentially y equals 5x minus 4. So if I ask for f of 2, which means what is y when x is 2, What Kylie did was she plugged in 2 for x here. 5 times 2 minus 4 is 6, right? So y would equal 6. Okay? I don't expect you to be experts after one example, but that's kind of what's going on here. Are there any questions on this part? Yes, Long John. I got 6 by asking for f of 2, means what is y when x is 2. I took this equation and I plugged in 2 for x and took 5 times 2 minus 4, which is 6. Okay? Yeah, Ellen. So these two things are the same. They're like math synonyms. Okay? So I got the y just by rewriting f of x as the variable y, because that's kind of what it represents. Okay? And then the second part here is understanding what this notation means. F of 2 essentially means plug in 2 for x, and what does the equation equal? Okay? So that's what I did, and I got 6. All right? Anything else? Anything else? Okay. Practicing this type of notation a little bit more. It says use f of x equals x squared minus 5, and g of x equals 12x plus 10. And the first thing I ask you for is f of 4. So which equation am I using? The f of x equation. And which variable am I solving for? Because I asked. Which variable am I solving for? Sophie. Because I asked. Which variable am I solving for? Claire. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Did you get it? Okay. Because she said why, so I said because I asked. Because I asked. Okay, so we are using the f of x equation for f of 4. And remember, this f of x is just the y variable, but it's written as f of x, A, to tell us it's a function, and B, so we know which equation to use, right? And what this is telling us to do here is replace x with 4. So we get y equals 4 squared minus 5, and what do we get? 11. Okay, 16 minus 5. Now, under this Mr. Happy Pencil, it says after solving, write the ordered pair. What ordered pair do we get from this? What ordered pair do we just identify as being on this or in this relation, Christopher? 4, 11, right? Because when x was 4, y was 11. Okay, so we defined function notation as being identifying ordered pairs as part of relations. We just did. 4, 11 is an ordered pair that's going to be on that graph. Yes, sir. Because I've got two equations here, right? Okay. If I tell you plug in x and solve for y, this solves the problem of which equation do I use. If it's f of 4, I use f of x. If it's f of negative 3, I use f of x. If it's g of 6, I use g of x. Okay. This is just a different variable than f, so I can tell the difference. Okay. It means the exact same thing. It just replaces the y value. Yeah.
How'd you get 4?
Because that's what I was told to plug in.
Like right there, like in the third.
Here?
Yeah.
Because that's what I was told to plug in. Plug in 4 for x. So for f of negative 3, I'm essentially asking now, okay. So when x is 4, y is 11, what's y when x is negative 3? So I go back to my f of x equation here, right? Because it's asking for f of negative 3. I remind myself that f of x notation is really just the variable y, and I plug in negative 3 for x. Notice my use of parentheses, okay? They are required here because what this means is whatever x is, that's what's being squared. Since x is a negative value, I need to include that negative sign as part of the base. Remember in your previous unit, we talked about when the negative sign is included and when it's not, those parentheses there. Remember that negative 3 squared is different than negative 3 squared, right? This is going to be negative 9. The result will be positive 9. The difference is that sign included in the squaring? Is it part of the base? And since my value for x is negative, and I'm squaring x, I need to make the negative sign part of the base. So, what does this equal? Negative 3 squared minus 5. Christopher? 4. Positive 4. Okay? If you got negative 14, you went to your calculator probably, and you probably put this in, and your calculator did exactly what you told it to do, which unfortunately was incorrect because you need to have parentheses around the negative sign here. So, what ordered pair is this? What ordered pair did we just identify? Negative 3, 4. Okay, when x is negative 3, y is 4. Right? The other 3 ordered pair, Max, yeah.
When I'm showing my work, do I have to go through each step, or could I just, like, for the second one, write y equals negative 3 squared?
You don't have to show it. No, I'm only doing this intermediate step here just to remind you that y and f of x are the same thing.
Yeah,
okay. Just for space reasons, let's go to g of negative 8, the far one here. Which equation am I using now? The g equation, right? Because it says g of negative 8. This notation says that when x is negative 8, it wants to know what y is. So I go to my g of x equation, which is 12x plus 10. I remind myself that g of x, just like f of x, really means y. That's what I'm solving for. And so in for x goes negative 8. And what does y equal? Ellen? Yes. Okay. Negative 86. And so the ordered pair that we've identified, negative 8, negative 86. Question so far? We're all good? Okay. Because it makes sense that if there's a notation that says, here's x, solve for y, then there's probably a way for using function notation to say, here's y, solve for x, right? And that's what the second thing that you'll come across means here, okay? When you see something like 4 f of x equals 2x plus 1, find x when f of x equals 9, the temptation here is to plug 9 in for the x variable like we kind of did up above. But notice the difference here. This literally says find x. Okay? So if you're asked to find x, would you be given x? No. So which variable does that 9 represent? Because I asked.
the letter y.
Okay? And remember, this f of x means y, right? And so if you kind of think about this, it says find x when y equals 9. Okay? Find x when y equals 9. You're being given the y variable this time and asked to solve for x. Okay? Means solve for y. Sorry, solve for x. Here, I wrote it backwards. With the given y. Okay? Find x when f of x equals 9 means solve for x with the given y. So what we do is we take this 9, we would plug it in for f of x, because remember, that just means y. Okay? And what value for x makes this true? Find x. Ellen? 4, right? 2 times 4 plus 1 is what gives us 9. Do you see the difference? Okay, to me it seems obvious because it says find x, right? But the most common mistake that folks make is they'll take this 9 and they'll plug it in for x and solve for y. That's not what this is saying. Okay, so similar to the examples above here, it says use f of x equals 6x plus 8 and g of x equals negative 10x plus 18 to find x when y equals 62. Is essentially what that is saying. Which equation are we using? F of x, right? So we can rewrite this. It says f of x equals 6x plus 8. We're told that f of x equals 62, that y value equals 62, and we have to find x, solve for x. What do you come up with? Joey, x does equal 9. Subtract 8 from both sides, divide by 6, kind of a review of two-step equations, and x equals 9. Well, it does say write it as an ordered pair. So what ordered pair would this represent, Alex? Were you stretching again? Uh-huh. Christopher? 962, right? That 9 comes first because that was the x value. And in an ordered pair, x values are always written first. Okay? I'm going on a limb and saying that this is new for pretty much everybody today. I doubt you've seen this before, at least, in this much of a context. So if you've got questions, it's okay. Let's make sure that you ask them so we get clarification also. Let's go to the third one. G of x equals negative 62. Which equation are we using? G of x. And we're finding x when g of x equals negative 62. Okay? So negative 62 equals negative 10x plus 18. Two-step equation, subtract 18 from both sides, divide by negative 10. What do we get? Positive 8. Okay? Negative 62 minus 18 is a negative 80. Divided by negative 10 is positive 8. Yes, sir? Yeah. That's what we solve for. Well, in this case, we're finding x. We were given the y value, which we plugged in for y, and we solved for x. Right? In the first notation that we talked about, it gave us the x value. We solved for y. This is how you would use function notation to be given the y value, given the output, and solve for x. So, and again, that key here, I mean, it literally says find x. Subtracted 8 from both sides and then divided by 6. And so what ordered pair is represented there in that third one, Kylie? 8, negative 62. Okay? And that 8 comes first because it's the x value. In an ordered pair, x comes first. So, your homework. I want you to finish this page here, and let's look at the second page to see what is in store for us here. Okay? It says answer each question below. Write the ordered pair being described. The first one says, what is f of 4 when f of x equals 2x plus 12? Which variable are you being given? Alexis? X, right? For this notation where it says, what is f of 4? It's telling you x equals 4. You're solving for y. Okay? Y equals 2x plus 12. You're being given x. You're solving for y. The one below that, it says, what is g of 5 when g of x equals negative 3x squared minus 2x? Which variable are you being given? You're being given x again, right? What is g of 5? That means that x equals 5. You're plugging it in, 4x, to solve for y. The second column, for f of x equals 2x plus 12, find x when f of x equals 16. What's going on here? You're being given the value for y, right? Y equals 16. Okay, you're solving for x. You've got two clues here. First of all, f of x is the same as y, so y equals 16, and it says find x. Okay? So pay attention to the verbiage. Pay attention to how it's being asked. If you've got a question, look back on the first page. You know, where do I see this find x? Oh, right there. This is what it gave me y. I'm solving for x. What's that? Yes, finish the first page and then these here. Alex? Yes, you may. But be careful with parentheses, right? Your calculator does exactly what you tell it to. And if you tell it to do the wrong thing, then that's when you get the wrong answer. Yes, sir? No, we're not done yet. There's more fun to be had. I wouldn't send you on a weekend without plenty of fun things to do. Okay? Then, looking at a relation on a graph here. The function d of t represents the U.S. national debt, where t is the number of years since 1970, and d of t is the national debt in trillions of dollars. Why would we be using d and t here? Where'd that come from? Debt and time, right? We're actually getting some context here, okay? We could use f of x here, right? But to go a little bit further and say, what are we talking about? D of t, the debt, right, after a certain amount of time. That's why your horizontal axis is labeled t. It represents time. And your vertical axis is labeled d of t. That's the y-axis. It's the debt after a certain amount of time. It says t is the number of years since 1970. So what would x of 10 equal? What year would that be? At the x value of 10, what year would that represent, Max? 1980, right? Years since 1970, 10 years since 1970 would be 1980. So it says, what is d of 40? Write your answer in context. We'll talk about that. When it says, what is d of 40, what is that referring to? Alexis. Right. This is your x value, your t value. It's asking, what is the debt after 40 years? Okay? So we go to x equals 40. We look at the graph. What's the corresponding y value for an x value of 40, Kylie? Right here. Okay? Which is 10 trillion. The debt is in trillions of dollars. So in context, how might we write this? In context. We don't just want to say, y equals 10, right? It doesn't really tell us anything. Kylie? 10 trillion. What was 10 trillion? The debt was 10 trillion. When?
2010.
Okay. The debt was $10 trillion, and you can write out the number 10 trillion or just use the word in 2010. Where does 2010 come from? Because 40 years after 1970 is 2010, right? So in context means what does this data mean? What are we talking about here? That's what I want you to do. What is d of 25? Write your answer in context, similar to what we just did there. And then lastly, find t when d of t is 14. Write your answer in context. Okay. The second one, similar idea, different graph here. The function represents the height of a rocket, where x is the time since the rocket was launched, and y is the height of the rocket in feet. So it's a parabola here because the rocket goes up and then the rocket comes back down again. Yes, you may. Okay. So it says, what is f of 7? Write your answer in context. Which variable is it giving us here? 7 is not a variable. Which variable is it giving us here? X. So it's saying when x is 7, right? What's the height of the rocket? 600 feet. Okay. The second one, find t when f of x equals 300. Write your answer in context. And then question 3, how high is the rocket at its highest point? How long did it take to get there? All right.
How would you write your answer in context?
You would say the rocket is 600 feet high after 7 seconds. Okay.
How do you find like the year or like how many?
What's that?
How do you find like the year?
The year?
Yeah.
On the previous one?
Yeah.
For which question?
The first two.
So the year is 1970 plus whatever your x value is, right? Our first one, D of 40, it was saying 40 years after 1970. 1970 plus 40 is 2010. So for the next one, where it says what is D of 25, you're going to be adding 25 to 1970 because it's 25 years since that time.
I can't see the numbers on the second one on the bottom. I can't.
The numbers, sorry, didn't print off all that clearly. The numbers count by ones, starting here with 0, and then they count by hundreds going up. So maybe just jot those in if you can't quite tell what they are. They count by ones going across the x-axis, by 100s going up the y-axis. Any other questions? Okay, this is going to be due on Monday, Kylie. Yeah. You are correct. You do need them both. Yep. Kylie's pointing out that for the second question here at this rocket, where it says find t when f of x equals 300, there are technically 2 answers, and you should write them both. Okay. All right. That's our math.